Good evening. This is a meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeals. The time is 7:07 p.m. and the date is June 13, 2017. At this time, I will call the meeting to order. The board consists of 5 members and 2 alternates. The alternates taking full part in the discussions and becoming a voting member in the absence of a member or when a member abstains for conflict of interest. Present tonight are Ms. Kate Housley, Ms. Joan Kranansky, and our alternate at the time is Mr. Aaron Thomas. I'm John Goldsey, the chair. Also, we have present zoning administrator, Mr. Rick Sorois, and secretary, Mr. Paul Eschenbacher. At this time, I invite you to view a pre-recorded video on the rules and procedures of the board.
The Athens Board of Zoning Appeals operates according to the following procedure. The chair will name and describe the case. The zoning administrator or secretary will state the basis of the objection and any applicable facts or conditions pertaining to the case. The appellant or their representative will give reasons why the appeal should be viewed favorably. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in general comment will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition will be heard. If necessary, the appellant or their representative will offer concluding, summary, or rebuttal remarks. Testimony from the floor shall be closed. The board will deliberate and render a decision. According to Athens City Code, Section 23.07.03b, the board has power to grant variances from the strict application of the code, provided the variance will not be contrary to the public interest, the spirit of the code is observed, public safety and welfare are secured, and substantial justice is done. According to Athens City Code, Section 23.07.10c, variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board makes specific findings of fact based directly on the particular evidence presented to it, that the standards and conditions imposed in this title, if applicable, have been met by the applicant. Exceptional circumstances. There are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone. Practical difficulty and undue hardship. Because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of these regulations will result in practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of public purposes. Preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation of these regulations would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity, while a granting of the requested variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other properties in the same zone and the same vicinity. Minimum variance. The variance granted is the minimum variance required to make possible the reasonable use of the property. Absence of detriment. The authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest. Not of a general nature. The condition or situation of the specific piece of property or the intended use of said property for which variance is sought, one or the other or in combination, is not of so general or recurrent a nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such condition or situation. Any person, resident, or officer, department, or appointed body of the City of Athens, aggrieved by a decision of the board, may petition the Athens County Court of Common Pleas concerning the illegality of the decision. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the decision of the board to the applicant. Thank you.
Had confirmed 5 members on the board, and Mr. Baum is not here right now. So before I go on, I want to go to these cases. And is there any representative for case number 1, which is 20 Canterbury Drive? We don't have the appellant?
I'm here. I filed, I filed a complaint against my neighbor.
Okay, but you are not the appellant.
Pardon me?
You are not the appellant, right? Okay. So we probably have to wait and go to case number 2. Case number 2 is the properties at 224 and 218. Would you be willing to hear this case with only 4 members?
Yes.
Okay. And case number 3, I'm sorry, 2 and 3 are the same. So what about you folks? Would you be willing to hear the case with 4 members? Okay, very good. There are 4 cases on tonight's agenda. One is the property at 20 Canterbury Drive. Case number 2 would be property at 224 West Union Street. The third property is 218 West Union Street. And the last case would be 55 Hospital Drive regarding a sign. The board requires to take testimony under oath. Would anyone wishing to speak concerning any item on the agenda, please stand. Anybody who wants to speak, please stand. Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you will present to the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Be seated. Thank you. We're just going to skip right now the first case because the appellants are not here. Case number 2 would be case 17-13S for substitution. And Don Linder is the appellant. The property is at 224 West Union Street. Appellant is requesting under 230502A a substitution of an existing structure with no structural alterations proposed for use, including residential occupancy of 5 below the second story and no off-street parking where 5 paved accessible parking spaces are required. For an existing structure, this is a substitution for an existing structure with no structural alterations or increased occupancy proposed, and the addition of 2 unpaid accessible parking spaces not located in front of the structure. Very wording.
Yes, it is.
Code Office, any comments? Anything you want to?
Well, in general, I wanted to remind the board of the procedure for substitutions, which is basically you discuss it, there's no findings, you just make the motion and second it and vote on it. But I'd like to read the specific paragraph that deals with the powers of the board in this case. This is under 230702B. For nonconforming uses, the substitution for a nonconforming use existing at the time of enactment of the zoning code of another not more objectionable nonconforming use, if no structural alterations except those required by law or resolution are made, provided, however, that in an R zone no changes shall be authorized by the BZA to any use that is not permitted or conditional use in that R zone, and in a B zone no change shall be authorized to any use that is not permitted or conditional use in that B zone. Now, the reason why his substitution request was so wordy was that he wanted to make it known to the board that there are going to be no structural changes.
Right.
Also, that just to remind the board that in a B zone, residential use is allowed.
Yeah.
It's regulated, but it's allowed.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any questions for the Code Office? Mr. Linder or your representative, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the records.
My name is Steve Pearson. I'm here representing Don Linder, part owner of the property in question. And just for a point of clarification, the section that the secretary read is not the section under which we're appealing. There are 2 different sections about nonconforming use in the code. and there's a very distinct difference in the language and the wording. It talks about changes in an R zone to any use that's permitted in any R zone in the A section. In the B section that Paul referred to, it says changes only that are permitted in, say, that R zone. So it's a difference between the word any and that. If you can see where I'm going here, because if the actual language is any change in that zone, we wouldn't be asking for a review. We'd be changing it to a permitted use. And so there'd be no need to come here tonight. So if you look at those two sections, I don't know if you've got copies of both.
I think the
of them.
section says that if the zoning board approves, so based on that, they just need the approval from us.
All right, I just wanted to make that clear, that language is different
Okay.
in two different sections of the code there. So just to start back in, several weeks ago, we were here presenting both these cases, and we were asking under the board's appellate jurisdiction to determine that the application of the code was not proper, and then a permit should be, the board should allow that. And we failed 3-2 to convince the board of that. At the time, we reserved the right to come back and ask for a substitution of nonconforming use. And so that's why we're here tonight. In a way, we had the same problem this time as we did originally. We were not given the specifics on which we were nonconforming, although there was discussion about residential use on the first floor and an insufficient amount of parking. There was a little bit of discussion about, is parking at ground level actually a prohibited use in B2 and more restrictive zones? But as you can see, we didn't actually have a document. I worked with Paul to come up with the wording for the agenda because we're coming up to the timeline for the advertisement. So I actually wrote the description of the substitution. So what I did was I tried to describe what was there and what we wanted to substitute. So just, we still kind of had that confusion going into it. In the documents that I provided, most of those that I originally gave to the Code Enforcement Office were documents you had in your possession at the first hearing. Really, the only additional document is there's going to be a couple of them. Let's see, we're doing 118 first, right? 220, excuse me. It's going to look like that. That's really the only additional document that you're going to have that wasn't provided in the other cases. And essentially what I did with this is I just went down through the existing situation and what parts of the code I thought were the non-conforming, and then addressing each of those to come up with a conclusion that what is proposed is not more objectionable than what exists. So of course, the first paragraph basically just describes what's there at the property, and the interpretation of extending or altering the property is what, kicks in the review under a non-conforming situation. So we know of two, maybe three. On the first one at 224, there is residential use at grade on the first floor in a B3 zone. There's no parking, and there's a parking space required for each resident. And then in the assumption too, we'll also argue that parking at grade on the ground is more desirable than essentially what I argued was building a parking garage, is what you'd have to do if that prohibition really exists on ground level parking. In the synopsis I gave you too, in that area, that's been zoned B3 since 1969, so it's been almost 50 years. And there have been, all the businesses that were there are now gone. Curtis Towing was right there for a while on either side of the street. The Happy Cat drive-through let's see, I think it's over in the M zone. The dance studio was there for a while, but at the current time, there are no business uses in that area at all. They're all residential uses. There are 17 privately owned properties, 26 total parcels. The difference is are parcels owned either by the trustees of OU or the OU Foundation. So every private use in that area is residential. And of all of those properties that have parking, it's all at grade. And many of the parking spaces are gravel. City regulations for paving requirement kick in at 4 or more. In this case, we're only able to put in 2. So the 2 parking spots, we would ask to be, to remain gravel. One of the reasons for that is there's no drainage in the area. There's no storm sewer system readily available. That area right there lays fairly low. And so not to create additional impervious surface or increase stormwater runoff, we prefer to leave the parking spaces gravel. Let's see. Something that I would like to note too, when this case was originally reviewed, the Office of Code Enforcement agreed with our interpretation that it should have been approved administratively. You have that document in the record too. So I wouldn't imagine that their position has changed from this document that they drafted in February. Let's see, what else? Another thing I'd like to bring to the record here too, I was the Director of Code Enforcement when the ground floor residential prohibition was passed. And to give you a little history on that, I was getting calls from other municipalities that wanted to know how we kept our downtown area street level businesses from converting to residential use. A lot of communities that are bypassed or where large developments have happened outside their historic downtown area, there's been a propensity for them to be converted into residential, which is not what you want at street level. My response to that at the time was, we have parking restrictions. Nobody can convert residential into the B2D downtown area here in particular because there isn't anywhere to put parking. And the parking garage doesn't count toward residential use. It wasn't until the Bellavino case on Stimson that the idea of parking on the ground for residential use was even considered some kind of improper or non-conforming use. So historically, this prohibition on ground level parking for residential use has not been, it's a fairly recent development, although I want to kind of date myself because it'd have to be more than 10 years ago, but in my mind at least, that was not what was intended with the original drafting. It was meant to address the downtown area and not necessarily the outlying B3 districts. Mm-hmm. To give you another example.
So, excuse me, but what does this have to do with the case we're looking at right now?
I'm trying to address the idea of the ground level parking, that it's not objectionable.
But we're not reviewing ground level parking, are we?
Well, there's 2 parking spaces. That's what the whole idea is here.
But you're discussing ground level parking below a building, right?
No.
No.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Bellavina, that's why, that's where that was leading, correct?
There's parking outside the building at
Correct.
Bellavino.
Okay.
I'm just trying to address everything because we weren't given a sufficient document of refusal, so I'm just trying to address everything. I'll just go ahead and something related to that too. The property that we're talking about here is the neighborhood. Let me back up a little bit. From the Hocking Valley Bank back to Sonic, there are 21 properties that are residential use on the ground floor and have parking at grade. So this isn't really, I don't think anybody thinks that's horrific, that, that's the situation there, or in this neighborhood. So I guess the whole conclusion here is we really don't want to change anything. I know you guys heard a case, 2 meetings ago, where somebody wanted to actually do modifications to a building, and you attach a condition to obtain parking. In our case, we're voluntarily asking, with no change in the building, no increase in occupancy, to create parking. So we'd like to create 2 additional parking spots, and that's the only difference than what exists there right now. So I can answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Pearson?
Would the 2 parking places that you're proposing to establish, or have already established, would they be for the residents of 224?
I believe that's the intent, that they be there to be provided for the residents, yes.
Would they be charged a fee for those parking places?
I don't know about that.
I mean, there's 5 residents, so you'd only have 2 spaces, so somehow,
Yeah, my discussions with Mr. Linder, and he can say something if this is different than what we've talked about. It'll just be included in the rent. That'll be parking for the tenants. It'll be included with the rent. There's no additional charge.
First of all, you need to swear in and then by the podium, please.
Yeah. So, no, there's no additional charge intended. It'll just be to provide a space for the tenants to park, and this time of year too, a space for a maintenance vehicle to park on-site, off the street, because there's so many places that are empty right now, just to get up. I mean, where are you going to park, for example, if you want to do maintenance of this property? You can't park out on, if you're a maintenance man, you can't park on Union Street, and this will provide a space also for maintenance.
Any other questions? I just want to summarize something to make sure that we all understand. You're substituting a non-conforming for another non-conforming. Basically, no changes.
Right.
And then basically what you want to propose in here, the 2 parking space is allowed in this zone. So we are not discussing that either. My only question in here is that which one is, and this is for the board, by the way, which one is more objectionable? The way as it is now, or adding the 2 parking space?
Just dirt and grass there now, and people park on it.
So, again, that's, if we can, you already addressed that, I believe,
Right.
partially, so.
if it's already a low spot and you're going to gravel it, so it'll still be permeable, but if you're going to park cars on it, you're going to pack it. And I know it isn't the same as pavement or cement, but it's probably still going to add to the water drainage problem back there.
What if every 6 months somebody goes with a shovel and kind of loosen it up?
Are you going to do that, John?
No?
I almost thought it would go without saying that parking is desirable.
Yeah,
I mean, you hear a lot of cases. Matter of fact, you require parking. That's why I brought that up.
right.
Parking is at a premium. It's a highly desired property condition, and I think the creation of parking addresses a longstanding problem that the city's had. It used to be that you could convert a property to rental purposes without parking. Mr. Baum was here. I would remind him, he was on council at the time, where to convert a property to residential, you had to create parking. And so that's been a high priority of the city for quite a few years, the creation of parking.
So, have you approached the planning commission? I mean, to me, what it seems like, because this is, you keep coming back, or this is your 3rd trip here, and a lot of the conundrum we've had to deal with is that the one of the 2 lots, not the one that we're discussing right now, is split, and both of these properties border on an R3. That whole stretch of West Union is residential housing. And it just seems to me, rather than nitpick into little things like this really needs to go to the planning commission. Would be their responsibility to consider a rezoning for that whole side of West Union Street. And
Joan, I think we discussed that before. And
We did, and that was one of our
well,
conclusions.
we kind of suggested that they are here and they have a proposal and we need to act on it to answer this. What happens later on with the planning commission, that would be a different issue, I think.
Right. I made comment in my presentation paper that the board might want to actually do a recommendation to the planning commission to reconsider several different items. Ground level parking, is that really a non-conforming use in a business zone for residential purposes? And should some of these business zones be reviewed, that they really shouldn't be zoned as business? They should be zoned, in this case, say R3. But we're not here to make that giant argument
Right.
about a rezoning of,
Right.
you know, hundreds of properties, not hundreds, but probably close to 100 if you consider the B2 down Stimson Avenue, the B3 at the end, at the end of Stimson, not Stimson, Richland, excuse me.
Richland Avenue, yeah.
B2 Richland, B3 Richland, and then B3 on the east on Stimson, and then this section of West Union. I mean, think of all the residential uses that are out there. Well, I mentioned it too, College Park, you know, that whole apartment complex out there. Graceland, Dr. Ross Stevens, that's all in the business zone with parking on the ground. You have the Blue Line Apartments, you've got Solon Bloom's Harold Blick residential development. That's a huge problem. We're here just, you know, asking for a very small change in a non-conforming use.
Any other questions? You may be seated for now. We may
Okay.
call you again. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this substitution? Anyone who wants to make any general commentary? Anyone who wants to make any opposition? So, unless you have any questions for Mr. Pearson, we're going to close the discussion from the floor. And there is no findings to go through, so again, this is a substitution from a non-conforming to another non-conforming without any changes that I can see. And what they are proposing, it is permitted in this zone. So basically, we have to either approve or disapprove. And do you have any questions or comments on the being more objectionable, this new proposal, or? I myself don't see any.
I guess my question is which section of the code are we going to use for interpretation? The section,
Well, section 230502A. And that's what Mr. Eschenbacher read, I believe.
I read 2307.
2307.
right, yeah,
oh,
no.
okay.
That's why I'm asking the question.
You
So-
can't use advertising under the A subsection.
So 2307, 02B, that in an R zone, no change shall be authorized, et cetera, that is not permitted or conditional use in that R zone. In a B zone, no change shall be authorized to any use that is not permitted or conditionally, or conditional use in that B zone. So it's
Okay.
the specific zone.
The specific zone, yeah.
Right, as
Yeah.
opposed to any B zone.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads you to what?
Well, then we're looking only at the B3. I did just go over that earlier. And I guess I'm, oh, here we are. Being used for... I think it takes me back to doing a modification under a grandfather, and this is what we discussed before, which then takes away the grandfather, and you're making a modification. You're adding a parking structure, and Not that I have any objection to additional off-street parking. I mean, Schaefer Street itself is crowded because there's many houses down there without parking. But I think that's an exception that we want to consider, is that they are making an alteration in.
Is that alteration allowed in this zone? Is the use of it, is the use of this alteration, is it allowed?
Wait a minute, say
It's a
that
business
again?
zone.
Well, if they were going to make, like, let's say, a building or accessory building or something, that may not have been, let's say they want to have like 3 or 4 accessory building, then that was not allowed. But having 2 parking space, is that something that is allowed? Its use has been allowed in this zone.
Well, let's see. Accessory uses and structures.
I'm not talking about accessory, and that was just an example.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm just saying, I mean, that's my point on this, is when people have grandfathers, we have a lot of grandfathers in this town, and it's not that I have objection to the parking. I'm assuming that the 5 tenants already have a place to park at this point. But what concerns me is excess parking, taking up space for excess parking, I think, because it wasn't really clear in the presentation.
So are you saying that they are having too many parking lot? Is the parking
No,
space is the problem?
because what it says is desire to expand parking to create accessible spaces or to create extra parking for guests, visitors, or maintenance. The maintenance is, I understand the maintenance, but just to put additional parking back in that alleyway, I'm sure we all went back there. It's pretty cramped back there for perhaps guests or visitors. You know, I guess I take issue with that. It's just so cramped back there. I mean, we had a case not too long ago up off of South Lancaster, up on that hill. And it was so cramped up there. And I just think that kind of tight consolidation is.
If somebody wants to put the entire lot of the B30 parking, wouldn't that be allowed?
Well, they're allowed 100% lot.
100% lot
Yeah.
coverage.
Because it's
Right.
business zone.
And I wanted to remind that in this particular case for 224, we're dealing with a property that has no parking.
Correct.
They're adding 2. So in my opinion, there wouldn't be an excess of parking at 224.
Because it's nothing there.
Okay, I'm just saying what they wrote in their presentation, right?
Currently, people just parking on the grass.
Yeah.
So this is an improvement to the
Improvement.
property, considering it has no parking.
My feeling is that they are just trying to really provide a service to their renters, to their people.
Service to the
otherwise-
city. It's keeping people
Yeah.
from parking on Schaefer.
Sure.
I see it similarly.
Okay, okay. Unless if there is any further discussion, anything else you want to add, or we understand?
No, I
What
just
you-
wanted to
your
express
concern
all
is.
that so that
Okay.
we,
Consider.
Okay.
yeah.
Are we ready to vote? I don't want to rush anyone into. Aaron?
Well,
Yes.
you need a motion.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Who wants to read the?
I'll make a motion.
Thanks, Paul.
I move that the board grant a substitution for nonconforming use under ACC 230502A in case 1713S, 224 West Union Street, of an existing structure with no structural alterations proposed for use including residential occupancy of 5 below the second story and no off-street parking where 5 paved accessible parking spaces are required for an existing structure with no structural alterations or increased occupancy proposed, and the addition of 2 unpaved accessible parking spaces not located in front of the structure. Second?
Do we have?
Second.
Okay, Aaron, second. And are we now ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor of this substitution, please raise your hand. So we have 4 to 0. You have the substitution. And I just want to clarify that we did not cancel or table the first case. We are just waiting. We changed the order. So if by the end of the meeting, the appellant for case 1 do not show up, then we will probably take a vote to what to do with it. Okay? All right. Case number 2 or 3 is case number 17-14S, the property at 218 West Union Street, Zone B3. Appellant is Mr. Don Linder. Appellant is requesting under 230502A a substitution of an existing structure with no structural alterations proposed for use, including residential occupancy of 3 and parking below the second story where such residential use is only permitted on the second story or above the paved parking on grade for 3 vehicles where only 2 are accessible and accessibility is required for all parking spaces. For an existing structure with no structural alterations or increased occupancy proposed, continued residential occupancy and parking below the second story and paved parking on grade for 3 vehicles where only 2 are accessible and accessibility is required for all parking spaces and the addition of 3 unpaved accessible parking spaces not located in front of the structure. Did everyone get that?
Yes.
Okay, very good. If it was up to me, I would just suspend the rules and start voting for the second case the same way.
Well, no, because what we have to realize is these 3 spaces are in an R3 zone.
We discussed this the last, 2 meetings ago? Because we was looking at how a lot of the properties overlap on zones.
Right, well,
Yeah,
that's
so
why
this
I'm
is-
talking about this whole situation needs to go to the planning commission to get rezoned on that side of West Union Street. I mean, they're all residential houses all along that, bordering on an R3. But the point is, in an R3, I think we're talking about parking in an R3. Mr. Soros or Paul, maybe you could clue us into what could be restrictions on just putting parking in R3 lot.
Well, they would have to follow the general. Well, I mean, the parking lot is usually considered 4 spaces and above. They're just putting in 3. So the normal things such as paving, landscaping and stuff do not apply. In general, parking lots are allowed in R3. I'm not sure what else you need to.
Well, this is the issue that we I wish I would have asked Lisa to come again tonight because we have two different zones that we're dealing with, and this is only being brought up in one zone. And this is where the real crux of the problem comes to bear, I think, is that we're dealing with a lot that is a split zone.
Let's hear from the appellant. They may have an answer for us. Mr. Pearson, you are still on the road.
Yes. I'd agree with Ms. Kornansky. This situation, even though it's just one house away, is a little bit different because it does have the split zone, and we made that presentation a few weeks ago. Part of my argument, too, why at that time that the permit should have been issued and approved administratively because the portion where the parking was proposed was in an R3 zone where parking areas are a principally permitted use. They're not prohibited, they're permitted. Parking is encouraged. And as Paul mentioned, the requirements for paving, drainage, landscaping, all of those don't kick in until 4 parking spots. So we're only proposing 3 parking spots. So we believe that really doesn't even apply.
And is it going to be gravel parking? It's going to be gravel? Or is it going to be
Parking
paved?
for 1, 2, or 3 is gravel. To give you a little more perspective on this, I was the code director in Nelsonville for 9 years, and they didn't have any regulations for conversion or creating parking, and I worked with the planning commission up there to come up with some. They have a paving requirement that kicks in at the very first space. So if you convert a dwelling unit or you create new parking, it all has to be paved. However, Athens has an allowance for gravel for 1, 2, or 3 spots. So we're working with the regulations as they are here. I would want to point out too, there is some existing parking there, but as I put in my presentation, for someone, if you're the third guy in, you're the first guy in at night, you got 2 other cars behind you, and they have to back out for you to get your vehicle out onto West Union Street. So we believe this is, there is a safety angle to this too, where you've got parking spaces that we're creating in the back where nobody has to move to get a vehicle in or out. So we believe that's, it's safer that way, and will make the existing non-conforming situation even safer. Tenants, if you have, and there's only 3 residents in that building right now. For the roommate that seems to be moving all the time, coming and going all the time, that spot in the back would be ideal for them to get in and out. And again, Mr. Linder, in a case, for example, where you might have all your residents there, say during the school year, a pipe bursts, there's some maintenance thing that has to be taken care of. This is also a space where the maintenance man could park. Or if you're having a party, I think Mr. Thomas mentioned he'd been in this area before, and there are social gatherings at sometimes where parking, becomes, desirable, so to speak. To kind of summarize some things too, and like I said when the comment that Ms. Granansky made, I think you do have several things here that you might want to refer to the Planning Commission. One, to consider the rezoning of this section of Union Street, Stimson Avenue, and some things down on Richland. That's a huge undertaking. I can imagine, I went through some rezoning
Well, excuse
procedures.
me, it really isn't our job to do that. I mean, if this is an issue for you or the person or persons you represent, then you should take this to the Planning Commission. We can only recommend that appellants move forward to the Planning Commission.
Right.
Or maybe Code can do that because they're represented at the Planning Commission, but that's really not our job to make recommendations.
Well, I think if we're not asking for a variance here, but in your sections on variance, the very last finding is if this is of such a general or reoccurring nature that the code should be changed, then the board has to consider that. We're not using that as a criteria for consideration right now, but I think it is within your jurisdiction to make recommendations to the Planning Commission. That's my opinion. Another one would be the reconciling of lot lines, where they split lots. This situation came up with Mr. Matters, and I think the Cat's Den here a while back, and the Planning Commission moved the line. There are several places in town where these lot lines split the lots. So I think that's another thing that the Planning Commission and Council should consider. Also in my presentation, I had there, it's been 5 years since some confusion has occurred regarding parking on the ground for residential uses in business zones. I don't know why it was such a big deal at the time, and it's just kind of faded away. So I think that's another thing that you as volunteer board members, could use some guidance on from the legislative side. And I guess also the prohibition of residential use in zones other than the downtown zone. That's just how when the Planning Commission recommendation went to council, when this ordinance was passed, it was probably about 12 years ago. I can't remember any discussion about the B3 zone, to be honest with you. It was all about the downtown area. Again, that might be something to review, especially given the information I provided to you, the multiple number of, let's back up a little bit, 50 years worth of zoning business, and businesses are leaving certain areas. They're not coming to them, they're leaving. The businesses are going out on East State Street, and that's all zoned M out there, the biggest part of it, especially on the south side of the road. So those are just some things I think that beyond this case, I think ours is pretty simple. All we're asking to do is add 3 parking spaces.
Right.
We don't want to change anything. We want to create more parking for the tenants. We want to make it safer. We're just asking for 3 additional parking spots. They'll actually be located in an R3 zone where parking is principally permitted.
Any questions for Mr. Pearson?
Yeah, I guess, quick question. I mean, I did review it, I didn't measure it. How much of that back part of the lot, what is the measurement of the portion of the lot that's in the R3 zone? And how much of that, what would be the measurements into the 3 parking places that are gravel back there? Do you know?
Right off the top of my head, I don't, but in the packet of information that I originally provided the code office,
was
there's a
the
site
last time.
drawing
Yeah.
of the property and the location of the parking, and I also drew where the district or the zone division line was located.
Yeah, I thought it was in here.
And I think, to be honest with you, these are some simple
Here you
little
go.
things that can be cleaned
18 by
up.
40,
She got it.
18 foot
Yeah, I
by
thought
40
it was
foot.
stuck to the other sheet. So basically, that whole lot will be gravel? That whole portion of the lot that's in the R3?
That's correct. Again, cut the same arguments. We're not required to pave it. There isn't, even if you would pave it, you would be causing more detriment,
Right.
in our opinion, than less detriment with the pavement. You're creating impervious surface, there's nowhere to drain the stormwater off to, you're creating heat sink. You're just compounding the problem, rather than trying to address an inadequacy or deficiency. This is the best possible solution that we can see to create additional parking.
Thank you, sir. You may be seated for now.
Thank you.
I don't think there is anyone, but I need to read this. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of this request, in general comment, or in opposition? I saw your hand going up. You were just a scratch. Okay. Okay. We close the discussion from the floor. And let's make a motion before we forget, and then we can discuss further. Okay, you did a good job last time.
All right. I move that the board grant a substitution under ACC 230502A in case 1714S, 218 West Union Street, of an existing structure with no structural alterations proposed, for use including residential occupancy of 3 and parking below the second story where such residential use is only permitted on the second story or above, and paved parking on grade for 3 vehicles where only 2 are accessible and accessibility is required for all parking spaces, for an existing structure with no structural alterations or increased occupancy proposed, continued residential occupancy and parking below the second story with paved parking on grade for 3 vehicles where only 2 are accessible and accessibility is required for all parking spaces, and the addition of 3 unpaved accessible parking spaces not located in front of the structure.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Aaron, second. Any further discussions? Aaron? No?
They helping the off-street parking problem.
Okay.
Just-
I remain persuaded by Mr. Pearson's argument.
Joe?
I still think that we're messing with a grandfather that we shouldn't be messing with. More so this one because they have everything they need to operate as a rental and including parking.
Even if it's a substitution of non-conforming?
Yeah, absolutely, I'm sorry.
Non-conforming?
No, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's absolutely not necessary.
Are we ready
And what
to-
happens is when you add additional parking, you add additional tenants. So,
Well, I don't think that would be something we can speculate right
no,
now.
I'm
Yeah.
just, but, you know, if we want to have a conversation, then that
Yeah.
is exactly what happens.
If people want to be there, they can park, you know, on Schaefer, which is what we discussed. Is the issue right now is people parking off-street. There's just no parking on Union Street.
No, but this house has
Yeah,
a
it has,
driveway
yeah.
that's sufficient, right?
Yeah, Yeah, it's already there, but I mean, I think they're helping a problem that we just discussed 10 minutes ago of people parking on Schaefer Street. And the minimum amount of parking spaces is usually the issue of having property owners create parking. They came to us to create parking in a area that's nothing but dirt right now, which people can park on if they decide to park
No, it
on.
wasn't dirt, it was grass, actually, and there was a tree there which was cut down. And what you have to realize is we don't really want to park over all available empty space around all houses, whether it's an R1, an R2, or an R3.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? All in favor of this substitution, please raise your hand. All opposed? So you have the substitution 3 to 1. Okay, let's go to our last case. I have to read this stuff before you come. Case number 17-15V. This is the variance case. Property at 55 Hospital Drive, Zone B3. Kessler Sign Company is the appellant. Appellant is requesting variances from ACC 230313I2D to allow a directional sign 7 feet 2 inches in height, where 3 feet in height is the maximum allowed. To allow that directional sign to be 19.5 square feet in area where 3 square feet is the maximum allowed. And to allow 2 directional signs at ingress-egress intersection where 1 directional sign is the maximum allowed. Going back to the code in office, no comments?
Pretty clearly explained with it.
Okay. Sir, you may come to the podium and state your name and your address for the records. And it's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Ray Lynn with Kessler Sign Company, 7240 Cattle Drive. First of all, I'd like to explain why I'm here and the issue why I'm here. What's happened is the Castrop building had the cancer patients coming in the front of the building. And the issue was that they were parked, I believe, about 50 to 60 yards away from the building, and they were walking to the front. They had explained themselves to evidently either the nurses or the doctors about possibly where could they park that was closer to walk into the building. At that point, they've gotten together, and Oblenis has decided that they moved it to the side of the building. Do you have the pictures? Do you have?
We have that one.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I'm just trying to decide which street is
Actually, it's
which.
this-
And
Actually, it's
Yeah,
this
I
right here.
couldn't-
yeah, no, I put question marks here.
Okay. The entrance is here off of West Union.
So this is West
is the-
Union?
The entrance coming in is here to West Union. This is the first, this would be the first turn in.
You go back
To
to the
the
emergency
emergency
room, right, okay.
And
And
then
then
this
that's
would
going
be-
into the parking lot.
Right,
And
this
that's
is the
Castro.
Castro. Okay, and what they did is, they went from the entrance to this side. And as you can tell, this is all parking right here. Okay, and there's only one entrance to this area. So what they're wanting to do is, they're wanting to have all the, it said chemo patient parking on the other side, which we got rid of that. But there's really no other way of saying it, but these are the cancer patients that come in and get their medication, and when they come out, sometimes that walk, they like to have a little more privacy. That's what they had said to the nurses or doctors. So they changed the entrance to the side. So that's why they want to have a directional showing the Ohio cancer care right there.
So why 2 signs, though? I mean, if that's the whole point.
Well, it's not, it's double-faced. That's what that sign is.
Oh, it's 1 sign, so it's not
One
2
sign.
signs?
No, it's one sign.
And we're saying 2 signs because it's double-faced?
I guess.
It was listed as a second sign on the
Two
permit
directional
application.
signs at the ingress, egress intersection.
It's
Yeah.
it's A and B. It's
Okay,
one sign.
that wasn't clear in the,
Okay.
so if it's,
It's one sign with two sides.
okay.
I think
Yeah.
that's what's on
Which,
there. right?
yeah.
Well,
the
that's
picture
not what it
shows
says here, but when you explain it now, I think it's clear.
Okay. I wasn't sure, did we submit it incorrectly? It's only been one sign, so.
Maybe you're saving the next one for the second one for the next time.
Well, I was told not to come back the last time. But anyway, that's the main issue. I mean, it's kind of, it's for clear and simple, precise direction for people that, for the patients that actually need it more than, I'm going to say, general public.
So the bottom is like, it starts from 8 inches and goes to 7 feet. All the ratings is in that area.
Yes,
Yeah,
right here. Yep.
Okay, okay.
It's the same exact sign that you have approved. It's just one additional sign.
Yeah.
Is it really essential? I mean, I go over there and it's like sign pollution city.
Pollution?
Sign pollution. I mean, there are signs everywhere. Sometimes I get confused as to where to go because it's like, oh, I should look at that sign or should I look at this sign? So I know it's important for people to get to where they need to go, and I'm hoping somebody's driving them. But does it have to be this large to actually get the point across, number one? And number two, the other question I had was in your rationale that says the signs have to be this height due to the visual acuity for people over the age of 40. Now, I'm almost double that, and I don't have any trouble with signage.
Well, you're not the norm, man. I can show
From
you.
my personal experience, every time I go over there, the streets are narrow and there is a stop sign, so I have to be watching for the traffic, and I often miss the signs. So my experience is different.
So
than
you
yours.
don't find that there's a lot of sign pollution going
No.
on over there at
In fact,
in the
sometimes
parking
Too
lot?
small.
Yeah.
I think they too low. If you got a big truck in front, you're gonna miss it.
Yeah, it's something that I never thought it was over signage. That's my
Well, it's
personal.
not so much that it could be up higher, but it's just taking up so much space.
Well, see, all the writings in there, there's quite a bit of information that needs to be visible.
I know, I'm still saying I feel like sign pollution is happening over there, and not that I want anyone to get lost or be incapacitated getting from their vehicle to the front door.
That was definitely the biggest reason that they changed it, was because of the walking distance, and actually there's a lot more privacy just in that area where they just walk into that side door and then they receive their chemo and then they're out of there on that
Right, yeah,
side.
I know where that is.
A lot of time, I mean, I know you know where it's at. I mean, when you come out of the front, you got that circular, and then you got to either come down those steps
Right.
or use the ramp. But the problem with that wasn't just the end of it. They had the parking spaces. I don't know if you remember, but there was about 3 or 4 parking spaces that just said chemo patients, but we couldn't keep them near the handicap, and they were the furthest away. And now they're going to be, for the cancer patients right there. I mean, that picture kind of shows right where they're going to be parking. So they literally get out of on the sidewalk and they can get to the building.
Well, your rationale for the variance number 3 does say to have 2 directional signs. It doesn't say back to back, so I guess that's where the confusion.
That's where the
came in.
confusion was. The variance that you submitted, the paperwork you submitted for your variance answer, on number 3, it says have 2 directional signs, instead of face A and B, like you showed.
Again, if you look at the picture,
There's just one sign with an A and B.
Right.
one sign, A and B.
Right,
Gotcha.
right.
Okay, any other questions for the appellant? You might be seated for now. I'm gonna just read this because I guess I have to. Is there anyone who wants to speak in favor of this request, or in general, or in opposition? I don't see anyone. So we're going to close the discussion from the floor. And we need some discussion, we need a motion, and we have to go through the findings. You want to go 3, 4, 3?
Sure. I move that the board grant a variance in case 1715V, 55 Hospital Drive, from ACC 230313 I2D to allow a directional sign 7 feet 2 inches in height where 3 feet in height is the maximum allowed, to allow that directional sign to be 19.5 square feet in area where 3 square feet is the maximum allowed, and to allow one
Two-sided directional sign.
One two-sided directional sign at the ingress-egress intersection where one, do we even need that part?
No, we don't.
So I'm
No,
going to strike that part.
Yeah, just strike that
Please
part.
forget I said that.
Correct.
Second? You want to second me?
Second, I'll second.
Okay, we have Joan second. Okay, very good. Exceptional circumstances. Are there exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone? This is all hospitals. There is no other. There's no other examples in there. Are we good on that?
Yeah.
Practical difficulty and undue hardship. No?
No,
Preservation of equal property rights.
no special privilege.
Again, there's no special privilege for this specific property. Minimum variance.
Well, I think there is a lot of special privilege for this particular property.
Well, what I'm saying, there's no other, we are not giving more privilege to this property than the others in the same zone, the same vicinity,
With the same use.
or the same use.
You have to say for the same use.
Yeah,
because,
but it's relevant.
It's denying this property in the same zone, in the same vicinity, it doesn't say the same use.
No, but
You made
in
that
this
up.
case,
I'm just saying, we have to admit that
Yeah.
we are making exceptions
Right.
But sometimes we
because
have to.
of its social services.
yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Minimum variance, this was minimum variance 3 meetings ago, and just started getting a little bit more than minimum now, but I think it is minimum as of now. Absence of detriment. There is not.
No, none.
And not of a general nature.
No.
No. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor of the variance, please raise your hand. We got 4-0. You have the variance. We'll see you next time.
No.
Okay, we need to make a decision on the first case. To your knowledge, are we having any cases next month?
yes,
One.
Okay, can we fit one more?
yes.
Okay. We need a motion whether to table the first case or just totally,
Well, this
Dismiss
gentleman
it.
has been sitting here,
I'd like to talk about that.
yeah,
well,
this
can
whole
we,
time.
can we have that talk without the appellant present?
I think we can hear the case, right, without the appellant.
You're allowed to, but it's also allowed to be challenged because the appellant wasn't
Wasn't
allowed
allowed to
to
speak.
represent
Right.
themselves.
And the appellant also did not provide us with a rationale for, respond to the findings, so we really have no background from the appellant whatsoever.
That's right.
My question is that, can we officially hear him tonight so he doesn't have to come next time? Or we won't ask any questions, we just hear what he has to say?
That's up to you, but I don't see the problem with letting him.
Speak.
Yeah, I think we've done this before.
Okay.
If
Because it'll be in the
someone came.
minutes if we need to
It will be in the
refer back to
minutes.
it.
Again, we won't ask any questions or anything. You can present your case, but you did not swear.
All right.
Do you swear that to tell the truth?
First of all, I'm
Before you speak, we have to make sure that you swear in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please go to the podium so we can hear you also. Thank you. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Tom Dunlap, D-U-N-L-A-P, and I live at 15 Canterbury Drive. I live right across the street from Mark Foltz,
Okay.
and that is the person that I've filed a complaint against. It has been almost a year that I have talked to Mark Foltz about this situation. I sat on a zoning board many years ago when we were designing the R1 zone, the R2, the R3. We were going through sign ordinances and everything. One of the things that in the R1 zone, and I'm sure you all know, is that you are not allowed to have a business in an R1 zone. Now, it's clear that Mr. Foltz has a business. He is asking, I think, what, for 3 people?
Yes.
Now, he has 4 right now. They work 8 hours a day. They can't keep the business going with that many people. I cannot understand how he can ask for just 3 and complete his business. I think there's something underhanded going on there, but I won't speak to that. Now, what happened was that I approached him because I knew the regulations and I knew he was in violation of the code. At that time, he said that he was going to move part of his business or all of his business to Middleport. That's where he's from. And he was going to get down there, and his wife at that particular time says, boy, I hope he does because I want my house back. Now, he has a warehouse under his house. He has 4 employees, which means an increase in traffic. He has UPS, FedEx, the Postal Service that is bringing in and taking out orders every day. Some of his employees load up their SUVs and take it to the post office. So there has been a dramatic increase in the number of cars and the number of trucks that are now in that place. I have asked him on occasion. Now, what he has done, he is very, very neatly, he hasn't got complaints from anybody else because the house right across the street, he hired a wife. He hired a woman. So she is working for him. Obviously, she's not going to make a request to live. On his right is a rental. So the rentals are not going to do it. The people to the right of me are now moving to Columbus to a condominium. So they're not going to create any problem either. I am very disappointed that he is not here. If he applies for something that in my estimation, is not worth even requesting, I don't even think he ought to even request that thing because he has other ways of doing or running his business. He talked at one time about going out to the little shopping mall on Route 50. He went out there, he looked at it, he was going to lease a place, and he was going to operate from that position. Now, he has also looked at other kinds of things, but he doesn't do anything. He's a procrastinator. He has been going on like this since last September. And, you know, That's my reason for disappointment in him not being here and answering questions that I have. I have talked to him. He came to me and he said, what would make you happy? What would make me happy is that he would get rid of his business. I don't believe that we can allow a precedent to be established by his business, and this is just not for Canterbury Drive, it's for the whole city of Athens. I have discussed that with him. What would make me happy? It would make me happy if you find a place in a business area and you can move your place to a business area. He has even asked my wife to work for him. So he is trying to pad his position. And I may sound a little bit disturbed, and I am, because I just assumed that he would be here tonight. I don't have anything else to say. I'm just dumbfounded by the fact that he's not here. I don't know why we have to even delay it, in my estimation. I don't think he ought to be given permission to hire more people.
Traditionally, we have had cases that the appellant did not come. And actually, as Joe said, we do have the right to continue with or without him, but we, as a courtesy, we have been giving the appellants a chance to come back. And sometimes there are emergencies in the family, there's cases that we cannot propose, so we're going to have to take a vote on that. We probably will not cancel or dismiss it, but we probably will table it. And as far as moving the business out, to my understanding, you're allowed to have an office with one employee, so that would be legal.
Yes.
And so the only question that we are discussing right now is for the additional 2 or possibly the 3 that you were mentioning. So,
Yeah.
and we will see what that happens. But thank you for your testimony.
Incidentally, what happens, maybe I can ask you this question, what happens if we refuse his 2 additional, the variance is not approved?
He'll be given the written order to only have one employee, and then we'll try to check on that afterwards to see that that's what he's carrying out.
Well, I talked to Ed Baum, and Ed, when I filed the complaint against him, Ed said, you're going to have to police this. And I
Yeah.
will police it, because I do not think that he has the right to break the rules and do what he's going to do.
Well, that's why we cited it.
Yeah, there was a letter was sent from the code office to him, giving him 30 days, I believe, to respond, and this is what the process is now.
Yes,
We're going
I
through.
understand the process, but once again, it's a delay tactic that he keeps going and going and going.
No, we won't allow usually more than, if he doesn't show up next time, we probably dismiss it.
I'm furious that he was not here, because he has to defend himself. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, speaking of this case, how would you like to proceed?
Shall we move to table it?
Okay.
I move to table it till next meeting.
Second.
Second.
Aaron, second. All in favor? So we have a vote of 4-0 to table that case. All that's left is approval of the last month's minutes. Do we have the motion to approve the minutes of May 30th? This was a special meeting.
I wasn't
You
there.
weren't
I
here?
wasn't there.
Yes,
Okay.
I approve.
Well, we only have 2, so
Can't do anything.
we'll have to wait till next month, so we have at least 3 people to approve it. Okay, I move to adjourn.
Be second, third, and fourth.